Every year, Proven Winners comes out a list of their National Plants of the Year. Today, we're going to take a look at the National Plants for 2024. Hi, I'm Heidi from Garden Crossings, and if you are new to our station, Garden Crossings is an online garden center. We are located in Zeeland, Michigan, so we have a walk-in retail store, but the majority of what we do is ship plants online across the United States. So if there's anything that we talk about in today's video that looks of interest to you, we are now taking pre-orders for the 2024 season. You can head on over to our website, gardencrossings.com, and shop for all your favorite Proven Winner plants. So let's go ahead and dive in and take a look at the national plants for 2024. The first one we're going to start off with is the Annual of the Year. This year it is Supertunia Vista Jazzberry, and I am so excited that Jazzberry made the list here in 2024 because personally this is one of my favorite petunias that we grow, but in all honesty it is one of my favorite, I would have to say it probably is my favorite annual that we grow as well. The display of color that these Vista series of petunias can give in a garden is unlike any other. So Vista Jazzberry can get about 2 foot tall by about 3 foot wide. Now, we do recommend that you water and fertilize these regularly. Water them depending on where you're at. Maybe need to be done daily, maybe it can be every couple days. But just make sure that you keep up on the watering, but most importantly is keeping up on the fertilizer. We recommend that you are fertilizing your Supertunia Vista series or any of your petunias weekly. Kind of the rule of thumb is feed them and they will be fabulous. And you certainly will be rewarded by beautiful summer-long color from the Supertunia Vista Jazzberry. This plant can be grown in full sun to part shade locations. Obviously, the more sun it gets, the nicer it's going to do. It's got a great mounding habit. So we use it a lot in a lot of our landscapes at the garden center just because of the sheer mass of color that the plant shows off. So I always tell people if they're a little hesitant to jump in on the petunia bandwagon because they've got memories of childhood and grandma picking at the petunias, I tell people these are not your grandma's petunias. They're not. Grandma was out there picking her petunias to keep them looking fabulous. These Supertunias, the no-pick petunia. You do not need to pick at these to keep them looking fabulous all summer long. And the reason is because they're sterile. So they don't come from a seed, so they have no job producing seeds. So and that's why Grandma was always out picking her petunias. It was because she was picking the heads and the seeds off to encourage more flowers. So super easy to grow, very carefree. The biggest thing I can say is, if you're somebody who doesn't fertilize ever, maybe not your plant. But if you fertilize and can dedicate yourself to fertilizing once a week, you are going to have the most beautiful annuals on the street. I promise you that. Next is the Caladium of the Year, and this year it is the Heart to Heart Lemon Blush. So Lemon Blush Caladium gets about 24 inches tall by 24 inches wide at maturity. Now for us here in Michigan, planting them in a container, they probably won't get 24 inches tall. So usually for us here when we're planting them, we'll get them about maybe 12 to 18 inches. But for those of you in the South, you've got long growing season and they may do better and get taller for where you're at as far as height. They can be planted in sun to shade locations, so very versatile as far as where you get them planted. They look beautiful in the landscape, creating beautiful sweeps of caladiums, borders, really beautiful in mass planting. Or plant them in containers, mix them in with your favorite annuals, let them be the thriller in the combination. And the foliage is really pretty. The different contrast that goes on with the kind of chartreuse color, there's some pink splashes in there. It's really a very beautiful, bright caladium. They're grown for foliage interest. They really don't have much flower going on, but the foliage itself is really a showstopper with a beautiful coloration. Next is the Perennial of the Year, and this perennial, it is a great one. It is part of the Salvia family. It is called Pink Profusion. And salvias can be annuals or perennials. This is a perennial, as it is in the Perennial of the Year category. It's hardy in zones 3 to 8, and it gets about 14 to 16 inches tall and about 20 inches wide, so kind of a nice mounding habit. Salvia are often planted in the garden because people want to attract hummingbirds and butterflies, and this is a great plant for attracting the butterflies and hummingbirds to the garden. The other nice thing with the pink profusion salvia, there is a perfect profusion as well, but with a pink profusion is that it's a repeat blooming perennial. So once it's done flowering or you feel like it's just kind of starting to fizzle and fade a little bit, go ahead, give it a light trim, and it will be back to blooming in no time. And this is something you can continue throughout the summer. Let it bloom. As it starts to fizzle, give it a nice little trim and let it go back at it again. You might do this 2, 3, 4 times, but that plant is going to reward you with beautiful, bright pink flowers all summer long. It does start blooming usually early summer, so I would say we probably start seeing some color here in Michigan late May. And like I said, it continues to go all summer long with just a nice light trim. It's also a deer and rabbit resistant perennial, so I know a lot of people struggle with deer and rabbits in their garden. So that's a great attribute to have when you're looking for some perennials, especially if you have those critters that can decimate your garden. There's 4 different in the profusion series, so if you wanted to pair pink profusion with other salvias similar to it as far as height and habit, there are 4 other ones that you could pair with it and have just a beautiful display of long blooming color in your garden. Now the Hosta of the year this year is the Shadowland Hudson Bay. Hudson Bay was one of the first, or near the first, hostas that were introduced in the Proven Winners. Once Proven Winners perennials started to expand, this was one of the first hostas that was introduced. It can be grown in zones 3 to 9, so very versatile, which most hostas are. Likes to be grown in part shade to full shade locations. And it gets about 2 foot tall by 2 foot wide. So not a small hosta, but not a giant hosta either, like the Empress Wu, but just really a nice size hosta for perennial beds or gardens, wherever it is that you put your hostas. Hudson Bay does get beautiful white tubular fragrant flowers, which is a welcome addition for hummingbirds. They love going in those tubular flowers. It's got large leaves, really heavily textured leaves, nice dark green with white centers. And one thing to say about hostas is sometimes the leaf color does change depending on where you're at in the season. So it may emerge in the spring just a little bit different than what it looks later on in the summer. And that's because of the amount of sunlight it gets over the summertime. You might find that your creams get whiter or your greens get lighter, and that's just the amount of sun and how long they've been emerged in the season. Also, because of the nice textured foliage on Hudson Bay, and it's a nice thick leaf as well, it has shown some pretty good slug resistance. So if you get slugs in your garden, this should be one that more than likely they'll leave alone. Nice thing with hostas is, what I like to do with hostas anyways, is I get a bunch of different ones, 5, 6, 20, 40, whatever it is, and I mix them. I love to mix them in the garden. Just the different colors, the different sizes, the different textures. It's really a pretty cool plant if you're not a hosta lover. Consider mixing and matching a few of them together just to create a beautiful patchwork of color in those more darker, shadier areas in your garden. The flowering shrub of the year is the Wine and Spirits Weigela. This plant has been out for a few years now, maybe 3 or so, and I feel like people don't know enough about it. So I hope that by getting placed on the flowering shrub of the year list, it causes more awareness for this plant, because it really is a beautiful, beautiful Weigela. Super dark foliage, so really, really dark foliage, and it's got extra large white tubular flowers. So that dark near black foliage with those white flowers, it is amazing looking. We've had them in the greenhouse, and we've planted a few out in the landscape, and every time those things come into bloom, it's a wow factor. They're simply stunning. Hardy in zones 4 to 8. They get about 3 to 5 foot tall and wide. They do like to be grown in full sun, And this particular shrub blooms off of the old wood or the previous season's wood. So we do not recommend pruning much after, let's say, September or so, because then you could be sacrificing the next season's blooms. The best time to trim your wine and spirits weigela, if you feel it needs a trimming, would be after it's done flowering. Some people want to just kind of trim it back a little bit, maybe get a little bit more appropriate size for their garden if they were planning on more of a 3-foot shrub and it grew up to 5 foot. So after it's done flowering is when I would recommend giving it a light trim should you desire to do that. The rose of the year for 2023 is the Oh So Easy Peasy rose. So easy peasy makes you think, you know, this rose must be easy to grow. Even the Oh So Easy series in general is a great series of shrubs, highly disease resistant, easy to grow, but easy peasy, that really tells you that this shrub is easy to grow. So it likes to be, actually it's hardy in zones 4 to 9, so it's got a pretty good spectrum as far as where it can be grown. It does like to be grown in full sun locations, as do most roses. The more sun you give them, just the better they perform, the more flowers you'll get. It gets about 3 to 3.5 foot tall and wide, so it creates kind of a nice upright mounding forming shrub, and it blooms off of the new growth. So if you trim it in the fall or give it a light trim in the spring, you don't need to worry about sacrificing your blooms. It will bloom off of the new growth that emerges. The neat thing with Oh So Easy Peasy is typically when you think of roses, you think of maybe a little bit larger flower. But Oh So Easy Peasy has large clusters, so lots and lots of smaller size flowers. So you're not going to get this one big rose presence on this plant. That's not what this plant is meant for. This plant is meant for big clusters, lots of flowers, and it's fragrant. Beautiful magenta blooms, fragrant, really a nice, beautiful, different looking rose that you maybe want to plant into your garden. It is a repeat bloomer, blooms all summer long, so it just continues to put out more and more clusters of flowers. You may want to trim it or deadhead it as you're going through the summer. I often find by deadheading my roses, it often helps promote more growth. So they're going to repeat bloom, but if you give them a nice trim, you're going to get even more flowers and more growth. So I do recommend after they're done flowering, giving them just a light trim to encourage more florific or prolific blooming throughout the summer. It is part of the Oh So Easy series. So as I stated a little bit ago, it is highly disease resistant. So you don't need to worry about some of the diseases that many roses get. This one tends to stay pretty clean throughout the summer. The next plant is the Hydrangea of the Year, and this is a brand new plant. It's only been out maybe, I think this is only the second, 2023 I think was the first season, so 2024 is the second season that this plant has been out there. And it's the Let's Dance Skyview Hydrangea. It's a macrophylla hydrangea. They bloom off of both the old and the new growth, which is true of all the hydrangeas in the hydrangea family. So if you see Let's Dance in the name, that gives you a clue that, oh, this is a re-blooming hydrangea. They're hardy in zones 4 to 9. They like to be grown in full sun to part shade locations. I know a lot of times people think that, oh, it's a hydrangea, it's got to be grown in full shade. But we find that with just a little bit of sun, it actually makes the plant grow and do more flowers and just give you the color that you want. It does bloom off of the old and new growth, so we don't recommend trimming these plants at all because there's not really a good time to trim them. If you need to, trim them after they're done flowering, but then that could also hamper your flowers for the next season. So you kind of have to pick your battle. Does a plant need to be trimmed because it's just getting out of hand? Give it a trim. It's gonna still bloom, but it might just take a little bit longer. One nice thing to point out with Skyview is it's very quick to set its next set of buds. So it blooms, it's quickly followed up by new buds, so it's quick to rebloom. So some of the old varieties of the hydrangeas from years back, they were called reblooming hydrangeas, But by the time they were ready to do their rebloom, your season was done and over with, unless maybe you were in the far south. But for us in the north, we'd get our early season blooms if we were lucky and didn't have winter kill. And then once we were waiting for those second blooms to come, it was fall already and the plant could have been hit by frost. So these new hydrangeas in the Let's Dance series are really excellent performers and are proving to show excellent rebloom and quick to do it as well. One thing I will point out, Let's Dance Sky View will have shades of pink or purple or light purple, depending on your soil condition. So be sure to know, if your hydrangeas normally turn purple or blue on you, that will be the case with Sky View. And if your hydrangeas are usually pink in your garden, that'll probably be the case for you. Now you can amend your soil to get the colors to change. And I will say it is much easier to change a pink hydrangea to blue or purple than what it is to go the other way around, turning it from purple and blue to pink. So you do have a little bit of play with the color if you should desire to do that. The next plant on the list is the Landscape Shrub of the Year. And this one is Itea Fizzy Mizzy. It's a sweet spire shrub. And Fizzy Mizzy has been out for, I'm going to say maybe 5 or 6 years or so. Time flies when you're having fun, right? But it's hardy in zones 5 to 9. And the thing that's unique with Fizzy Mizzy is in the spring, it gets beautiful white bottle brush flowers. So a lot of the other Itea that we carry, the flowers kind of droop or weep over, which has a great look. But Fizzy Mizzy is nice because the flowers are straight up. So you've got your flowers just kind of spiking off the plant and are very, very visible on the foliage. Fizzy Mizzy gets about 2 to 3 foot tall and wide and likes to be grown in full sun to full shade locations. So really, no matter where you garden, if it's a sunny spot or a shady spot, you're going to do well, or you should do well with the Fizzy Mizzy. It does bloom off of the previous season's growth, so you need to make sure that if you need to do any trimming on the plant, that you do so after it's done flowering in the spring or early summer. That way you don't risk trimming off any of your next season's blooms. Sometimes though you do, you have to sacrifice and trim the plant whenever it works for you. Or I always tell people, if your plant is getting too big and out of hand and you're looking at it, and this is true of shrubs in general, this isn't Fizzy Mizzy, but if you feel like your plant is getting out of hand and you just don't like it, trim it, because otherwise you're going to be mad. You're going to be mad at that plant for not looking good or being too big or whatever the case may be. Just go ahead and trim it, because you'll be happier with the results of trimming it. Either A, it grows back and grows back beautifully to the size you're wanting it, or B, if it was an ugly plant and you didn't like it anyways, it may just die. And what that will do is that gives you opportunities. A dead plant is opportunities to plant something you like better in that space. So rarely does that happen. Most of the time the plant comes back and looks beautiful. But if it doesn't, for some reason, you gotta look at those things as opportunities. Which again, like I said, this doesn't have to do with Fizzy Mizzy per se, just shrubs in general. So let's head back to Fizzy Mizzy. It's a deer-resistant plant, so that's great. If you can get a plant in your garden, especially if you have deer, it's always nice to know what are the safe plants to plant. Drought tolerant, those blooms in the spring, early summer, they're nice and fragrant. It's a native shrub variety. And as I mentioned, it blooms early summer, and this is a twofer plant because it has beautiful early summer blooms, but it's also got great fall foliage. So if you're looking for a plant that does two things for the price of one, Fizzy Mizzy Itea is certainly going to check that box with spring flowers and beautiful fall foliage. The houseplant of the year is Mythic Dragonite Alocasia. So Alocasia, I've seen this plant. We actually carried it in the garden center last year. This plant has amazing texture. It looks almost like leather. It's very thick foliage, leathery. For an Alocasia, it's fairly smaller in size. It gets about 2 foot tall, 12 to 24 inches tall and wide. So not a super tall Alocasia. It's got kind of a green to a pewter black color on the leaves. On occasion, those leaves will also take on some kind of purple hues, so that's kind of pretty. It does like to be grown in bright, indirect east or west facing windows, and prefers to be around 60 to 85 degrees. So it is a house plant that you could use outdoors in the summer if you wanted to use it in your combination planters or whatever. You just really do need to watch the temperature, that it's not dropping much below 60 degrees. It does like humidity, so humid areas like bathrooms or such would be a good area to keep this house plant. It does also like great drainage. So it likes humidity, which is wet, but it doesn't like its roots to sit wet. So make sure that the plant is getting good drainage when you are watering. Next on the list is the National Recipe of the Year. And there's actually two of them that I'm going to be talking about. The first one is Polar Peach. And I really enjoy this particular combination. It's, again, not necessarily Heidi colors, because Heidi doesn't always like to use orange, but Heidi says she doesn't like to use orange, but every time she sees them, she likes it. So I gotta stop saying I don't like orange, because I think I'm becoming an orange lover. But Polar Peach consists of 3 annuals. The first annual it consists of is the Supertunia Mini Vista Indigo, which is it's part of the petunia family. So it's a little bit smaller petunia, very deep dark purple, beautiful, beautiful purple color. The second plant in the combination is the Superbells Double Amber, which is a nice double million bell, super bell, just a small little flower, about the size of a quarter or so. But a lot of times those million bells or super bells are just a singular flower. This one is a beautiful double flower, and it's orange, but it's got lighter orange tendencies, kind of peachier tendencies of orange. So it's really pretty. And then the third plant in the mix is the Superbena Sparkling Amethyst. So that is a verbena that is purple and white, so kind of a bicolor. I love that plant. Like that's a great verbena to use in any combination. So if you took the trio of color and put it together, you've got purple, orangey, and then purple and white. And then if you wanted to really make that planter special, you want to put a thriller in there, or a nice upright something cool. So for this one, what I would recommend doing is taking the cypress grass, the queen tut, and that's just going to give you just a little bit of grassy look, give you a little height to that container, and really creates a very nice looking porch pot. Or I probably wouldn't do it in a hanging basket, because I think the queen tut would get a little bit big, but it would make a great porch pot. Or take that grouping of plants and plant it in your landscape, and that would look really cool as well. The second and last in the national combo, or the National Plants of the Year, is going to be a second combination or National Recipe of the Year, and this one is called Sunshine State. I wish I was in the Sunshine State today. It is a blizzard out there here in Michigan. So Sunshine State consists of Superbell's Coral Sun, Calibrachoa, which is a beautiful orange, kind of again, a little bit lighter orange with a nice, almost yellowish center. It's a really cool plant. We'll pop pictures up on the screen of it. Also Scaevola Blue, Whirlwind Blue, which is an excellent drought tolerant, wind tolerant annual. And then with the luscious Garden Gate Lantana, which is also another great drought tolerant annual. So with this mixture of colors, you're getting a golden yellow, you're getting a nice bright purple, and then kind of that nice orange color as well. So it's a really cheery combination. This one does tend to be a little bit more drought tolerant. Superbells don't like to have wet feet, so they're going to be a little bit happier on the drier side than what they are on the wet side. So really a neat look. And this one too, creating a really stunning combination by adding a thriller to it. Again, the Queen Tut Graceful Grass is an excellent choice. And to be honest, Queen Tut, Prince Tut, all of those are nice size grasses that you could use in any annual combination. So we've been really excited to see what the list here was for 2024. A lot of great choices. And yeah, I'm excited to see how many of you also are excited for these new 2024 varieties. I'm just looking over the list here. I mean, man, jazzberry, you can't go wrong. I mean, that one's just, that plant's going to owe you nothing at the end of the summer, and it's going to create the talk. You're going to be the talk of the neighborhood with that because it's so striking. And pink perfusion salvia just blooms all summer long. I mean, that's a wonderful attribute. Wine and spirits weigela, such a different looking plant, and that contrast, the black and the white, is so beautiful and so stunning. Can't go wrong with roses and hydrangeas, really, no matter which one you pick. And that Fizzy Mizzy Itea, just a different plant. I mean, I don't know how many of you have heard of Itea or have used it in your landscape, but it's so versatile in the full sun and the full shade. Really a great, versatile, fragrant native plant. And playing with annuals and putting combinations together, that's always a fun thing to do. And speaking of which, if you have any questions or comments on any of the plants that we talked about today, but even specifically, if you are wondering, do these annuals pair well together, don't hesitate to send me an email or leave a comment below. I'm always on the other end of the question, ready to get you an answer. We have a lot of experience with pairing plants together, so if you have any doubt in your mind or just want to pick a brain, we're here to help create the best looking gardens, landscapes, and containers that we can for you. If you're new to the station, please subscribe. That way you will be notified when we put up a new video. Thanks for watching. I'm Heidi from Garden Crossings.